Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever had that moment, that sort of low-grade panic? You're facing down a crucial deadline, maybe just hours away.
Yeah.
It could be, final signatures for a mortgage closing that popped up last minute.
Right. Or like a real estate deed that needs witnessing properly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe an I-9 form for that new hire who starts tomorrow, and you need it verified now,
Yeah.
and you're here in Massachusetts.
Yeah. Finding an experienced notary public who's not just available, but like fast. And maybe outside the usual 9 to 5.
And ideally, willing to come to you. Suddenly that simple task feels, kind of overwhelming, like navigating a maze.
It really does. And it's a surprisingly common snag in, really critical processes. So many important legal, financial, even employment steps depend on getting the notarization right.
Right.
And like you said, the requirements aren't always straightforward. Loan documents or thick packets, I-9 verification has its own specific rules. It's not just watching someone sign. And then you've got things like powers of attorney or those Massachusetts-specific co-RI forms. They all need real precision.
Yeah.
So finding someone who has that specific know-how and who's actually available when you're in a bind, that's often where people, hit a wall.
That exact scenario, that frustration,
Yeah.
is really what our source material today zeroes in on. We got some video clips, details from a website that don't just talk about this challenge, but actually present a specific solution operating right here in Massachusetts.
Right. The core issue highlighted in the sources seems to be that old way of doing things. You have to travel, they're only open business hours, and maybe they don't have the specialized knowledge for those really high-stakes documents.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive then is to really get into these sources. Let's try to understand the service they're describing.
Yeah.
And pull out the key insights for you listening. How does it aim to make getting notarizations simpler, especially for those tricky, time-sensitive ones?
Absolutely. So the sources introduce a service called hiremobilenotary.com. They describe it as a trusted mobile notary public service focusing on Massachusetts.
Okay, hiremobilenotary.com. So that's the proposed fix. And the sources go into detail about the range of services they cover.
Yeah.
Let's maybe focus first on those specific documents we mentioned, the ones that often cause the urgency or need that special experience.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And what's interesting is how the sources specifically call out their experience with these tricky ones. They mention handling last-minute loan signings, including mortgage signings.
Which, as you said, are not simple.
Not at all. They often involve huge stacks of paper, really strict instructions from the lender. You need a notary who's actually trained for loan closings.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And sticking with property, they also mention signature witnessing for real estate deeds. Obviously critical for any transaction.
Yep. And then for the business side, or employment, they specifically highlight I-9 employment verification. And it's probably worth pointing out, for an I-9, the notary isn't actually notarizing a signature in the traditional sense.
Right.
Yeah, they're acting as what's called an authorized representative. They have to physically look at the identity documents, verify the person's employment eligibility. It's a distinct process, quite regulated. The sources indicate their notaries are skilled in that specific task.
Okay, that's really important context. Good point. They also mention handling essential personal and legal stuff, like power of attorney forms, and specifically for Massachusetts, key OI forms.
Right.
Which, for anyone less familiar, key OI is about criminal record checks, right? Often needed for jobs or volunteering in certain fields here.
Exactly. Providing that kind of specific local context is helpful. But yeah, beyond those really core, often urgent needs, the sources do show they cover a lot more ground too.
Right.
They talk about handling everything from, standard affidavits and sworn statements to more specialized things.
Yeah, I saw that. Things like apostille services, which sounds complicated, but it's basically getting documents authenticated by the state.
Right, by the Secretary of State.
So they're accepted overseas, like birth certificates, diplomas, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for countries in the Hague Convention, they also list certified and notarized translations over 110 languages, USCIS approved, apparently, plus trusts, wills, various business docs, medical forms, even specific ones like the DS-30 passport consent form.
Wow. Okay, so it's a pretty comprehensive list. It does sound like they position themselves as a go-to resource for a lot of things.
Definitely versatile. But it feels like the main thrust, the real emphasis in the source material, is on solving those critical, time-sensitive issues we talked about first. The loans, the deeds, the I-9s.
And maybe the biggest clue in the sources about how they solve the problem is, well, it's right there in the name. Mobile Notary.
Yes. This is where the service really flips the script on the old way. Well, the sources make a big point that their notaries come directly to you. Your home, your office, a coffee shop, wherever you choose.
Oh, okay.
It totally shifts the burden. Instead of you hunting down a notary and traveling, they bring the service to your location.
And I think one of the video clips even threw out a statistic. Something like 80% of business professionals prefer mobile notary services.
Yeah, I recall that. That number really speaks volumes, doesn't it? It suggests this isn't just some niche thing. There's significant demand for services that fit into people's real lives and schedules.
Absolutely. It underlines how much people value their time, especially in professional settings.
And going hand in hand with being mobile is their availability. The sources really push this as a core advantage.
Right. They explicitly say they're available 7 days a week, even after hours.
Which directly tackles that problem of needing a notary, say, late Friday evening or on a Sunday when almost everything else is closed.
Exactly, when those urgent things seem to pop up.
That kind of round-the-clock availability is just crucial when deadlines don't care about standard business hours, especially for things like loan closings, which can definitely happen at odd times.
Now, while mobile is clearly central, the sources do also mention they have an in-office option for people who might prefer that.
They do, yeah. They list an address for that. 1215 Main Street in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. So it offers flexibility depending on what makes sense for the client's situation.
Okay, got it. So they're mobile, they're highly available, they cover a wide range of documents, including those tricky ones. But what do the sources say about why you should trust this particular service, beyond just being available?
Well, they put a lot of emphasis on the quality both of their notaries and the service itself. They use words like experienced, professionalism, reliability, precision, care, attention to detail.
I noticed phrases like guaranteed on-time service, too. Talk about meticulous document review, making sure all the legal requirements are met.
Exactly. For something as vital as a deed or a loan signing, knowing the notary is thorough and experienced, that must reduce a lot of stress and prevent potentially costly mistakes down the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they specifically mention having local expertise, particularly in the Boston area, which suggests they understand any specific Massachusetts nuances for notarization.
And to kind of bring this all together, make it more concrete, the sources included a testimonial. It was from Kate Shadler, a title company consultant in Newton, MA.
Yes, her story really ties together those points about urgency, availability, and expertise quite well.
What did she say?
She described needing a notary for loan documents, like right away, last minute. She emphasized that the service was on time. They gave the documents the close attention needed for perfect notarization.
Okay.
And crucially, the convenience of them coming to her office after normal business hours was, in her words, invaluable.
That's a great example. It directly illustrates how that mobile after-hours availability plus the promised expertise can actually solve that exact kind of urgent problem we started with, especially for critical documents.
Yeah, and it's powerful coming from someone in the title industry where proper, timely notarization is just non-negotiable.
Okay, so let's try to sum this up based on what we've seen in the sources. We've looked at a service, hireamobilenotary.com, that seems designed specifically to tackle those common headaches people face finding experienced, available notaries in Massachusetts, particularly for urgent needs.
Right. The core solution seems to revolve around being mobile, coming to you, and being available basically anytime, 7 days a week, after hours included.
And covering a broad spectrum of documents, but really emphasizing those key ones like loan signings, real estate deeds, I-9s, powers of attorney, and core I forms.
Yeah. And what's kind of insightful here, I think, is seeing how a business model is built not just on providing a service, but on actively dismantling the traditional barriers to accessing it.
What do you mean?
Well, the location constraints, the limited hours, maybe even the lack of specialized knowledge for complex tasks in some traditional settings. This focus on bringing expertise and convenience directly to the individual seems tailor-made to cut down on stress and delays.
Especially when those processes themselves, like buying a house or starting a job, are already pretty high pressure.
Exactly.
Thinking about how often documents like deeds or loan papers are tied to really major life events. And how incredibly frustrating it is when simple logistics or bureaucracy get in the way.
It really does raise an interesting question for you listening, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Given how critical and, frankly, time-sensitive documents like real estate deeds or loan papers often are, what does having that specialized expertise available, combined with the sheer convenience of service coming directly to your location? What does that actually mean for reducing stress and just simplifying those really significant life transactions?
It probably means a huge difference for a lot of people. Less running around, less worry about mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever find yourself in Massachusetts needing documents like the ones we've discussed, notarized maybe quickly, definitely conveniently, and needing specific expertise, you now have some insight into one service presented in our sources that aims to meet exactly those needs.
And the sources did provide contact info if you wanted to learn more or schedule something.
They did. The phone number mentioned was 978-424-4629.